From the Folger Shakespeare Library, this is Shakespeare Unlimited. I'm Farah Kareem Cooper, the Folger Director. In the U.S., Adjoa Andoh, MBE, might be famously known as Lady Danbury, the mistress of high society in Bridgerton.
Would it pain you to wear some colour, Your Grace? The London season is already terribly monotonous as it is. Must your wardrobe do the same?
I was told this look is all the rage.
Certainly not mine. Take my arm.
On film, Andoh has played roles such as Nelson Mandela's chief of staff in Invictus.
You risk alienating your cabinet and your party.
Your advice is duly noted.
Madiba, the people want this. They hate the Springboks. They don't want to be represented by a team they cheered against all their lives.
Yes, I know, but in this instance, the people are wrong.
But Andoh is also a renowned stage actor and director with a long Shakespeare resume. She's performed in productions of Julius Caesar, Pericles, and Troilus and Cressida. In 2019, she conceived, co-directed, and starred in Richard II at Shakespeare's Globe.
He is our cousin. But his doubt when time shall call him home from banishment, whether our kinsmen come see his friends. Ourself and Bushy, Bagneter and Green, observed his courtship to the common people. How he did seem to dive into their hearts with humble and familiar courtesy. What reverence he did throw away on slaves, wooing poor craftsmen with a craft of smiles and patient underbearing of his fortune, as 'twere to banish their effects with him. Off comes his bonnet to an oyster wench.
Andoh's Richard II was the UK's first production to have a cast and production team made up of women of colour. And performed on the eve of Brexit, she had something to say about Britishness. In 2023, she directed and starred in Richard III. This April, Andoh will inaugurate the new director's residency here at the Folger. We're very excited to welcome her to Washington, D.C. In addition to engaging with the Folger collection, Andoh's week-long residency will involve programs open to the public, like a screening of her Richard II and a staged reading commemorating the 90th anniversary of the Federal Theatre Project's Macbeth. Here's Adjoa Andoh in conversation with Barbara Bogave.
Adjoa, it is so nice to have you here on the podcast.
Very lovely to be here with you, Barbara.
I cannot believe what a packed slate you have for your 1 week at the Folger.
Listen, you're a long time dead.
I gotcha. Well, let's get going then. Let's start with the screening of Richard II. You've talked about it a lot in the past 7 years since it debuted, but do you have new insights or a different framing for this particular Washington-based Folger audience?
The thing I love about Shakespeare is he's always relevant. So I think, at the moment, the world is having conversations about who is a citizen of where and who deserves the protection and the love of the nation state, and who is inside and who's outside the tent, I guess. And when I conceived of doing Richard II in 2018, it was because we were just coming out of the conversation about Brexit, which necessitated lots of conversations about who the nation felt it was, who it was connected to, who felt they were inside the tent, who felt they were outside the tent, lots of those questions. And Richard II is a great play for speaking into that sense of the nation and the love of nation and how you best treat, preserve, and encourage the flourishing of the nation. And I feel like it still has an awful lot of currency in the situations we find ourselves in as a world today.
Right, and we could talk about this for the whole hour, but I'm going to drag it back to theater.
Drag it back. But I'll tell you why it's interesting to me, because theatre is in conversation with the world. If it's good theatre, it's always in conversation with the world. And Shakespeare, when we were doing Troilus and Cressida a few years at the RSC, then we were thinking about AIDS, and we were thinking about COVID, and we were thinking about ideas of fear of disease. And then we think back to when Shakespeare was writing, and he was, the theatres were regularly shut because of plague. So good theatre is always in conversation with what's happening currently, to your point about screening Richard II.
Well, yes, and everything you're saying leads me to the question I wanted to ask you about your Richard II, which is you started right from the start in the set dressing and the costumes and the casting for your production. And this is Richard II, Shakespeare's alleged love letter to England. You just take aim at the question of who owns the narrative of the dawn of England. And your answer is the colonies that fed its coffers. And that's really clear just in looking at you as Richard. You're wielding a fly whisk instead of a scepter, and that nods to African presidents of the past. And you use a shruti box from India. You hear that as part of the musical accompaniment. And your cast comes from all over Africa and the East. And
the cast came specifically from all over, everywhere that the British Empire went to.
Yes.
So I decided, not just the production, but everybody concerned with the production. So the fight director, the voice coach, the photographer, the people that wrote the program notes, everybody was going to be the musicians, the composer, the set designer, the lighting designer, the costume designer. Everybody involved in that production was a woman of colour, apart from the candle technician who was attached to the globe. So everything about that production, from the poster, which had my big brown face in front of a flag of St. George, the flag that's quite often used to make people fearful if they can't count their English Anglo-Saxon heritage back generation upon generation. And I just decided, let's own the flag. We helped to nurture, stain, flourish this flag. It's our flag. I'm going to have that flag with my big brown face on the front of it. I want to use women of colour because I want to say the empire, Great Britain, is great because of all those contributing nations and peoples. Who was always at the bottom of the heap? Women. Who's at the bottom of the women heap? Women of colour. Let's do everything with women of colour. Because why not? Because we can. So that's just me being a bit provocative, having fun. But then, the minute you do that, then the next thing you have to say is, don't fuck it up.
Well, you already answered my question, which was what kind of conversations you had to create this kind of, it's visual world making. You made a world. You remade a world. And your Richard, in a way, is very remade as well. I mean, I think your Richard II was sharper and smarter, cannier than some Richards I've seen. And you really travel this long way with many way stations from Richard as kind of an arrogant guy's guy at the beginning of the play to a very lost little boy doubting his own sanity by the end. So where did you start in shaping that performance?
I always start with Shakespeare. Everybody has got a perspective on everything, and on Shakespeare, my God, we've all got a perspective. But for me, I think of him as a great lover of human beings. The fact that he writes on a heartbeat, I know it's the old cliche, he writes on a heartbeat, speaks to me of an interest in the human experience in the world, that when you put a load of human beings together, their hearts will sink. That's just scientific fact. It's what we do. We're supposed to be in communion with each other. And for me, the humanity of Shakespeare's eye and ear means that I must apply that same lens to all the characters. And for me, I wanted to look at, what does it do to the human psyche if you are told that you are God's chosen, that you are divinely in the position you are in? So you've got that on the one hand. On the other hand, your father dies when you are young. You are raised in a court that is febrile. You are under the protection of your uncle. Where are your boundaries? Where are your good guides? And who was taking care of your heart? I trained as a psychotherapist. I'm a bereavement counsellor. I trained as a sort of what we call a reader in the Church of England, which means you preach and you take services. I do charitable stuff. I guess I just like people, and I'm interested in what, where does the wonder of that little boy, Richard, where does that go in amongst all these competing interests, in amongst the stories he's been told about himself and the stories he hears in the court around him? And so I think that, the character you see at the end of the play is purer by far than anything you see at the top of the play. And Shakespeare takes us on that journey. And that journey strips away all his trappings of power, but also his sense of himself and his sense of who he is in the world and what he deserves and what he owns and what he earns. And by the end of the play, you just have this very simple clarity, which is why I wanted him to be, you talk about the fly whisk, that's an absolute, it's just a symbol of power. By the end, he's lost all his gold braiding, he's lost all his fly whisk, he's lost his crown, he's lost all his jewels, he's just in a scruffy vest and a pair of pants. Because I wanted him stripped back physically and emotionally and intellectually. So you get that clarity when he's in that jail cell of understanding that, unless you can be happy with being nothing, you will never be happy. You are no more or no less than any other creature on the planet.
I had this image of your script, looking at your script, and that there would be marks all over it, but one mark where you found a pivot point where, okay, this is where the disintegration starts.
Well, for me, the disintegration starts, I think it's 3-2, when he comes back from Ireland and he hears that his uncle has switched sides.
Sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings. Some have been deposed, some slain in war, some haunted by the ghost they have deposed, some poisoned by their wives, some sleeping killed, all murdered. For within the hollow crown that rounds the mortal temples of a king keeps death his court.
For me, that's the moment where everything starts to melt for him and disintegrate. And he understands that he is alone. And I think after that, you just see disintegration. 4-1. 4-1s are always interesting with Shakespeare, aren't they? But this particular 4-1 where Richard has to give up his crown, for me, on a nightly basis, purely as a creator and a storyteller, was one of the most glorious times I've ever had in my over 4 decades career. I just felt like I'd been given all the choicest foods in the world to eat, the finest drinks, the best clothes, everything was in that scene, that glorious scene where the language just takes you on this journey, from hostility and absolute refusal, the sarcasm, the disdain. It just strips everything away, and by the end of the scene, there he is nothing and he has nothing.
I have no name, no title. No, not the name was given me at the font, but 'tis usurped. Like the heavy day that I have worn so many winters out and know not now what name to call myself. Oh, that I were a mockery, king of snow, standing before the sun of Bolingbroke to melt myself away to water drops.
I just think it's a fabulous bravura piece of writing. It's funny, it's sharp, it's vicious, it's pathetic, it's everything.
It's everything,
and it's all
everything human.
Yeah, in one scene.
Yeah.
Glory be. Mr. Shakespeare.
Oh, that's wonderful. I want to ask you about physicality and gender. You, in particular, project power and authority. It just resonates. I mean, it just vibrates off of you. And it creates this wonderful tension when you are vulnerable in a scene, because there's such a distance that you've traveled from that. And and you see it in everything from your Richard II and Richard III to Lady Danbury in the TV series Bridgerton. So,
Yes.
so I hear you. That was so beautifully said about it all flows from the text, from the character, from that. But what do you draw on to grasp, to vibrate the sense of sovereignty and clout?
I think it depends. You just haven't seen me playing those parts where I'm the crappy little person who's desperate to join in and all of that, which is also true. And I think sometimes the power that you project is just a cover. It's not real. It's just fear turned outwards. So it looks like it's in charge, but it's not.
And trappings of power.
Trappings of power can do that to you, or the game face that you choose to put on, that we all do in different circumstances. I think I always start with the vulnerable, because that's I think the most interesting and reflective place to start. And then you can think about the strategy and how you need to project in order to be what you need to be in any given set of circumstances.
Well, there are two sides of the same coin, is what I was thinking. And I know that you've often talked about how some of your earliest school memories are of kids just smashing you upside the head every day so hard that you saw stars. I mean, that toughens you up.
Yes, but that was probably the first 6 months of my primary school when I was 4. And you experience things and it teaches you how to be in order to have what you want and avoid what you don't want. And sometimes you have power to change that situation, and sometimes you don't. But I think what it also did, it toughens you up on one side, but on the other side, it makes your heart break, because you think, why is that happening to me? That's what did I do? So I think both those things are happening at the same time, which is, partly why, Richard III was so interesting to me, because I'm always curious what happens when you punch down on someone for long enough and then they punch up. I think it's all grist for the mill, really. And I kind of love it because I think it can give you a sense of empathy and a sense of curiosity to kind of go, yeah, but what's going on behind the whatever the outward thing is, whether it's somebody who's very reticent or very shy or timid, or somebody that's a blowhard, or what's really going on. That's what I'm always interested in.
Well, I want to pick up on that in relation to Richard III, which you've said you've loved him since childhood, or the play since childhood. And it seems like that's the through line. What happened to Richard? What's at the root of
make
his
Richard
alienation, right? And the persecution, his otherness. Yeah. And
yes.
And so why have you loved it all your life? Like, what did you see in Richard that you
because I think I
with?
empathized. I think I empathized quite early on with somebody who was loathed by a parent, was treated with suspicion and disdain, all because of a physical characteristic that he had that those in his community didn't have. And they decided to ascribe something base to that characteristic. And in Richard's case, it was a spine that was not a regular spine. In my case, it was a brown face in a white community. So I absolutely empathized with him. And I, again, Shakespeare, the humanitarian, the person who's interested in the heart, he doesn't start off with having Richard III saying, I'm a villain and I'm going to do bad things. He starts off with saying,
since I cannot prove a lover to entertain these fair, well-spoken days, I am determined to prove a villain against the idle pleasures of these days.
So his first instinct is to ask for and reach for love. And when he has his great, terrible nightmare, he talks about dying and nobody caring that he's died. I shall despair, he says, no creature loves me, and when I die, no soul shall pity me. Somebody who is without a sense of needing love wouldn't say those words. I'm super interested in what happened, Richard, what happened? So that's what I wanted to explore. And I think any well-written character will have levels of who they think they are, as opposed to who the world thinks they are. and, justifications for their behaviour. Richard, when he gets rid of Anne, his wife, who in our production, absolutely, he falls in love with her.
And that's what I was going to
him.
ask you. It seems that this flows directly out of your emphasis. The through line is love. So you do make this choice to interpret Richard as truly falling in love with Lady Anne, the widow of Prince Edward.
Vouchsafe to wear this ring. To take is not to give. Look, how my ring encompasses thy finger. Even so, thy breast encloses my poor heart. For both of them are thine.
So he doesn't just seduce her for political or pragmatic reasons.
No. And again, I go, little lost boy, who are your pals? You were great at doing war. Everybody thought you were good at war, but the play opens and war is done. And who are you now? And what is your place? Because you're not attractive. You're not in line for anything. You're just Gloucester. What's your life going to be? Your mother loathes you. She wishes that, you died at birth. She regrets what came out of her womb when it comes to you. She doesn't support you in any way. She publicly humiliates you. You're the foolish brother to your big, biffy, older king brother. And you're not really loved or cared about in any way. And then suddenly, here's this young woman, and she too has been caught up in the game of politics. She's married who she's married, and
you've just murdered her husband.
Well, a couple of weeks back. There's been a respectful space.
Too soon.
But I just think that for a moment she looks at him with eyes that are not the way people normally look at him, and he suddenly sees himself in her gaze, and the gaze he sees is astonishing to him. So that speech he has when she's gone, that he has wooed her, him who killed her husband, him who everybody thinks is disgusting and ugly and misshapen and to be avoided. How has he done that? That's amazing to him. And I just, for me, I'm more interested in playing the astonishment and the possibility for transformation through love than I am in playing somebody who's evil. It's just not interesting to me. Most human beings are not evil. They are the sum of the damage that's been placed on them. That's, to me, I'd rather watch that, so that's what I'd rather play.
Okay, well, this is the part where we talk about what you mean when you talk about swinging the lens, which is the name of your production company.
If you're on a film set and you want to change focus, you swing the lens. So you will go from a this size lens to a that size lens, and it will give you a different focus on what you're shooting. So for example, you see a scene, the fancy folk are sitting having cocktails or whatever, and the maid or the manservant comes in with a tray and picks up the glasses or delivers more glasses or whatever, and then backs out of the room and done. And meanwhile, the conversation is going on with the fancy folk. I've always been interested in, hang on a minute, forget the fancy folk, don't care about them. Who's that maid? Does she like her job? How many hours has she been up? Do her feet hurt? Has she got children? Who's looking after the kids? How long did it take her to get here today? So so swinging the lens is also to me about going, whatever you lot, let's have a look at this person. That's interesting to me. And I feel that a world peopled with a whole variety of narratives that we tell each other would be a world that was more sympathetic to other people's stories. And sympathetic, therefore, to other people.
And they shake people out of a rut, out of seeing things the same way. And it reminds me of Brian Eno has a whole deck of what he calls oblique strategies.
Love Brian Eno.
Yes, and when you get stuck, you pick a card and you think differently. Think of it backwards.
Yes.
Tell the story backwards.
Yes.
Turn this upside down. And swinging the lens, of course, applies to Shonda Rhimes' Bridgerton, in which you play Queen Charlotte's closest friend, Lady Danbury, the mentor to all the society folk there.
Yeah. I think Shonda has done something properly narratively shaking in our industry, in that I think she's telling that genre of story in a way that hadn't been addressed in that way before her. One of the things I love about Shonda is she just kind of goes, what if we did it from this perspective? And then she does, and it shifts things. So, as we know, there is no Queen Charlotte in any of the Bridgerton novels. Julia Quinn's fantastic and very popular, internationally best-selling series of books. So Shonda introduces Queen Charlotte to the mix, and introduces Queen Charlotte in a historical form that we haven't seen before, although it's absolutely there in the history of the time. And Shonda goes, well, let's have that Brown version and stick her on the throne of England and see what that does to the stories that we can tell. So I just think it's fantastically interesting at another level for viewers of colour. It does a couple of things. I guess it says you don't always have to play the slave or the indentured labourer or the courtesan or the, all of that stuff. There are other roles available.
When you're working on Bridgerton, does your
Yes.
Shakespearean side come into play? And I'm thinking in
Yes.
this season in particular, you have a storyline of some real depth and poignancy involving your desire to go back to visit your ancestral homeland of Sierra Leone in the story, but the Queen won't let you go.
It has been the honor of my life that you chose me. I treasure every moment. But it is time. I long to travel, to visit my ancestral home. I have not been there since I was 4 years old. So, I would like to leave at the end of this season. Of course, you and I shall write, and I will be back for visits, but I am leaving. I should like to leave for a time. No.
I don't know that Shakespearean I don't know if I'm thinking of Shakespeare specifically around that story arc, but I am thinking of Shakespeare in the use of language, the way Lady Danbury uses language. I think something happens when you do a lot of Shakespeare. Your ear sort of tunes into, why are we using that amount of assonance in a sentence? What's the alliteration that we're using here? What is Shakespeare telling us about the state of mind of the character when they use a particular sort of language or particular sort of rhythm? And I want to take that into Danbury because I think she is a woman of precision, because precision has been the way that she has survived in this society. But also the sense of stakes. He's always talking about power. She's always navigating in a world of how do I hold on to power? How do I reinforce my power? Who is powerless? Who needs to have a bit more power? Who needs to step away from the power? And how do I navigate the central power that I have access to, which is the Queen? And how do I use my intelligence to protect her, or further what I want, or just navigate her capriciousness? All those sort of things come into it, I guess.
Well, your connection to Shakespeare clearly goes so deep, and it goes so far back, but it sounds like you were first introduced to Shakespeare almost by accident.
I went to see The Tempest. I think I was 8, and I went with my friend Liz Johnson. What I thought we were going to see Captain Mannering on stage.
That's why
Captain
you wanted
Mannering,
to go.
That's why I went. Yes, that was the lure for me. Maybe that was the way it had been sold to us by Liz's parents. And maybe they thought we'd get the Shakespeare bug sort of tangentially from that. But it's a great place to take kids to. So anyway, for American listeners, Captain Mannering was a character played by an actor called Arthur Lowe, who was actually a great Shakespearean actor. Arthur, it was from a sitcom from the 1960s and 70s about a hopeless troupe of Home Guard during the Second World War who were always getting into scrapes and being rubbish. So I went to see Captain Mannering on stage, but Captain Mannering was Arthur Lowe playing Prospero in The Tempest. And I just think it's such a fantastic play for kids to see as their first engagement with Shakespeare. It's just full of magic and comedy and tragedy and love and rage, and it's got everything. So I just remember being completely caught up in the spectacle of it. That should be your first experience of Shakespeare. It should be watching a production. It shouldn't be poring over, a play in a hot, stuffy classroom over weeks and weeks when you just think, kill me now if I have to turn the page on this again.
Well, exactly. And that's what I wanted to ask you about, because from that young child, your first encounter with Shakespeare, now here you are, an MBE and an ambassador for the Royal Shakespeare Company. How do you plan to make Shakespeare more inclusive in your role as ambassador?
It's nothing to do with Shakespeare. It's always to do with how people use Shakespeare as a big stick to bonk people over the head with and go, you're too poor, too stupid, and too uneducated for Shakespeare. Go away and watch your silly soap operas and let us carry on. And I would just say, Shakespeare tells banging stories. Lots of them are full of soap opera elements, thank you very much, of drama, of will they, won't they, of terror, of horror, of comedy, of slapstick. It's all going on there because, he was competing with the bear baiting down the road or the prostitutes over there or, whatever. He had to grab his audience and keep them. And his feeding of his family depended on the brilliance of his pen. So it was a properly transactional showmanship going on as well. It wasn't some sort of esoteric, let me impart my wisdom to the world. He was a practical man. He needed to make money. He needed to be the best writer so that his company would be taken up and paid. And he gave us banging stories with which to do that. And those stories are still banging. The fact that we want to, ring fence them off in a particular way, I just find annoying.
Yet another thing you're doing while you're here in Washington is you're rewriting the Federal Theater Project's legendary Macbeth that was staged in Harlem in 1936 and directed by Orson Welles. And for people who don't know it, was a landmark show in many ways. It had a cast of people of color. It was attended by integrated audiences at such a segregated time. And it was set in 19th century Haiti, and the witches were priestesses. But it was also pretty much the most stereotypical portrayal of Black people ever. So a very controversial history. And now you're doing a staged reading of your revision while you're here.
I'm not rewriting Orson Welles' text. I haven't read Orson Welles' text. And I don't know that I'm interested in reading Orson Welles' text. What I am interested in is the fact of Black classical actors having the opportunity to work together on a production that this very ambitious young 21-year-old took on. Interestingly, there was a Black woman director who wanted to direct it, and she got shoved sideways. So, plus ça change. So what I'm interested in doing really is, celebrating the fact of its existence, the fact that there were working actors, musicians, performers in that period who had no problem with Shakespeare, but had a problem with not having the opportunity to perform in Shakespeare, and this production gave them that opportunity. The fact that it was staged at the Lafayette Theatre in Harlem, and crowds flocked to see that production.
It was a sellout crowd. It was the biggest theatrical production that came out of this theater project.
Exactly.
The entire federal
and nobody And nobody was intimidated by it being Shakespeare. People just came in because Macbeth is, it's a fantastic play. So for me, I want to celebrate those classical actors from 90 years ago, those black classical actors following in the tradition of Ira Aldridge, who changed the way we do Shakespeare entirely in Britain. I wanted to celebrate the audiences that came to see that production. Again, it's about expanding who thinks they're in it and who thinks they can watch it, and do a reading and let that reading sit in relationship to the geography in which it's held at the Folger, in the theatre there, which is in Washington, D.C., which is sitting alongside an enormous, great seat of global power. And let's talk about power and succession in this context of this production, and remember that earlier production as well.
Well, I can't wait to experience it, to have my heart sink up to it. And I hope you have a wonderful time while you're here in Washington. And thank you so much for this.
Barbara, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been really lovely talking to you.
That was Adjoa Andoh, interviewed by Barbara Bogave. Andoh's director's residency at the Folger runs from April 19th to the 25th. For more information about public programs at the Folger, including the screening of Andoh's Richard II and her stage reading of Macbeth, please visit folger.edu. This episode was produced by Matt Frasica. Garland Scott is the executive producer. It was edited by Gail Kern-Pastor. We had technical help from Ati Pikul in London and Voice Tracks West in Studio City, California. Our web producer is Paula Garcia Acuna. Leonor Fernandez edits our transcripts. Final mixing services provided by Clean Cuts at 3Cs Inc. If you're a fan of Shakespeare Unlimited, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Shakespeare Unlimited comes to you from the Folger Shakespeare Library. Home to the world's largest Shakespeare collection, the Folger is dedicated to advancing knowledge and the arts. If you're in Washington, D.C., come visit the Folger on Capitol Hill. Come face to face with a Shakespeare First Folio in our exhibition halls, or take in a play in our theater, or enjoy our Quill and Crumb Cafe. We'd love to see you. For more information, visit our website, folger.edu. Until next time, thanks for listening.